Hi, Year 8, and welcome back to English. So today we're going to do some preparation work for beginning our reading of Act 2. In Act 2, we're going to be introduced to a lot of new characters that we only really briefly met in Act 1, Scene 1. And these are all the other characters who have been washed up after the shipwreck. So the only one that we've really truly met at the moment is Ferdinand. We've obviously had that little scene between him and Miranda and Prospero. But the rest of them, the other people who were on that ship who have been washed up on the island, we haven't really met them, and we meet them in a lot more detail in Act 2. So for this lesson, we are just going to do a little bit of work to make sure that we're really clear on who is who in Act 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you this information about each of the characters, and then you're just going to do a little bit of work to really show me that you understand who they are and their relationships with one another, and so that we can kind of keep a grasp on who's who, because it is a little bit confusing. There are lots of names to remember. Okay, so first of all then we have Alonso. Alonso is the King of Naples. Now, remember, when we heard Prospero's backstory, Alonso was the one who helped Antonio to get rid of Prospero, to get rid of him as Duke of Milan and take his brother's place. He has two children, a daughter called Claribel and a son called Ferdinand. We've already met Ferdinand. And it was his fleet of ships that were returning to Naples from Tunis, but they're caught in a huge storm. Travelling with him is his son, Ferdinand, who we've met, his brother, and other nobles. They are all washed up on the island after the storm, although Alonso thinks Ferdinand has drowned. And remember, Ferdinand also thinks that Alonso has drowned because he already thinks that he is now the King of Naples. So he's assumed that his father has died. We learn that Alonso also assumes that his son has died. So as the king, he has the highest status of the nobles. So alongside Alonso, we also have the Duke of Milan, but the Duke of Milan is not as important as the King of Naples. So Alonso is really the most important person on board. Like I said, he helped Antonio to take Prospero's place, which means that he's not really going to be in Prospero's good books. He is going to be one of the people that Prospero potentially wants to get revenge on, because Alonso really had a hand in getting rid of Prospero. I don't think without Alonso, Antonio couldn't have really done it. It was because he had Alonso's help, and he used Alonso's soldiers that really got rid of Prospero. His ship is returning from Tunis, where his daughter Claribel married the king of Tunis. So that's the reason why they were on this ship in the first place. They were traveling from Tunis, which is in Africa, and they were traveling back to Naples, so back to Italy, over the Mediterranean Sea, and that's where they've been caught in this storm. He's very upset at losing his son Ferdinand, who he thinks has drowned. So that's Alonso. Now, as we're going, I should probably tell you that your task is going to be to fill out this who's who. So if we just scroll down until we get to Alonso, yeah, he's the one with the crown. So what you might want to do at this point, as we've just finished, I've just finished talking about him, is you might want to fill in your details about Alonso in this box now. So pause this video and write down, just summarize the main things that we need to know from there about Alonso. Okay, now let's move on to Sebastian. So Sebastian is King Alonso's younger brother. So this is the brother of the king. Now, like Antonio, he is both aggressive and cowardly. So both of these characters, Antonio, who remember is Prospero's brother, and Alonso's brother, Sebastian, they're both quite similar and they work together. And we see in Act 2 that they actually start to make this plan together, that they're by basically killing Alonso, by killing the King of Naples. So they work well together because Sebastian is prone to falling around in a mean-spirited way, and Antonio earns Sebastian's trust and respect by also being a horrible human being. So they're just drawn together by both being nasty, awful people, basically. Now, obviously, Sebastian is interested in stealing Alonso's throne because that's his brother. So, of course, he wants to steal his brother's throne. And when Sebastian is moved to murder his own brother, it's at the suggestion of the traitorous Antonio. So they just feed off of each other. They give each other these terrible ideas. So remember, he helped Antonio to take Prospero's place. So he was also part of this plan. He wants to be king of Naples. So he's ambitious. He's greedy. He wants this throne all to himself that belongs to his brother. And he's easily persuaded to murder his brother Alonso. So he's quite influenced quite easily. So yeah, not a nice person. So again, you could pause the video now and complete Sebastian's little box, which is down here at the bottom. Okay, next up is Antonio. So now we're talking about Prospero's younger brother. So Sebastian is King Alonso's younger brother. Now Antonio is Prospero's younger brother. Now don't forget, Prospero told Miranda at the start of Act 1, Scene 2, he used to really trust Antonio and trusted him so much, in fact, that he helped Prospero to rule and do his kind of duke duties because Prospero was distracted by them studying the magic, which is what he was doing. But Antonio broke this trust and used it against his brother and secretly gained more and more power, and then secretly plotted with Alonso to overthrow Prospero and have him and Miranda removed from the city, which is obviously exactly what happened. So Antonio is just this traitor, basically. He's betrayed his brother Prospero, and he took his title, which is Duke of Milan. Now, because of this, though, Antonio obviously owes something to Alonso because Alonso helped him. So Antonio owes a debt to Alonso for his help. And therefore he wants Sebastian to become king of Naples instead so that he can be released from that debt. Because as long as Alonso is king, Antonio is going to owe him something. But if Sebastian becomes king of Naples, then all of a sudden he doesn't owe him anything. So that is Antonio's motive for helping Sebastian become the king of Naples, because he's just like, well, I don't want to owe the king of Naples anything. And if it's Alonso, I owe him something. But if it's Sebastian, then I don't owe him something. So in brief then, Prospero trusted him to rule Milan while he was studying his magic books. Antonio has to give regular payments and support to Naples in return for Alonso's help in overthrowing Prospero. So therefore, Antonio would prefer Sebastian to be king of Naples. So you see how this little alliance that we see between Sebastian and Antonio, it's all very, very self-beneficial. It's not anyone being kind. It's always someone them being selfish. Sebastian obviously wants to be king to take the throne for himself, and Antonio wants to help him, not just to be helpful, but so he's released from this debt, so he doesn't have to keep helping Naples, so he doesn't have to keep paying these payments to Naples and to Alonso. So it's all very selfish. Okay, so pause the video again and fill in the key points about Antonio now, which is here. Okay, so on to Gonzalo then. Now, Gonzalo, we did meet in Act 1, Scene 1 briefly. And we also heard about him briefly from Prospero in Prospero's backstory. So let's just remind ourselves. So he is the chief advisor to Alonso, the King of Naples, which means, you know, he gives him advice. He tells him what he should and shouldn't be doing. that kind of thing. Now, he is remembered by Prospero for his kindness in making sure that supplies, clothing, and books were put aboard the boat when Prospero and Miranda were cast out to sea. And that's what Prospero told Miranda about. He said, we would have died if it wasn't for Gonzalo giving us those supplies, giving us the food, the clothes. Then we wouldn't have survived. And also the books, that's important because these aren't any old books that Gonzalo gave to Prospero. These were Prospero's magic books, the ones that teach him basically how to cast spells and to, control these magical beings. And we know that he has control over Ariel. We know that he has magic. He's already cast a couple of spells in the play. So that was all Gonzalo's doing, really, because he was the one that made sure that Prospero had those books on the boat. He also tries to keep Alonso positive as they search the island for Ferdinand and is aware that Sebastian and Antonio make fun of him. So Gonzalo is really just this kind soul. Sebastian and Antonio are horrible. They're plotting behind Alonso's back. Meanwhile, Gonzalo's just trying to keep Alonso positive. Alonso thinks that his son is dead, Ferdinand. He thinks he's dead. And Gonzalo's just trying to G him up, tries to keep him positive. So when Prospero's cast out to sea, Gonzalo helped him by giving him food and drink, as well as rich clothing and important magic books from his library. He is loyal to Alonso and tries to keep his spirits up as they search the island for Ferdinand. These little things that I'm telling you, by the way, about these plots and Gonzalo keeping Alonso positive and all this kind of stuff. This is what we are going to see in Act 2. So if you're thinking, I don't remember that in what we've read so far, don't panic. This is what we are going to read, that you shouldn't already know these things, but I'm just giving you a little bit of information so that when we get there, you know exactly what's happening. So pause the video and fill in Gonzalo's box for me now. And now let's go on to our final two, which is Ferdinand and Miranda. So these two characters are ones that we have kind of met. In fact, we have met them. Ferdinand is the only son of Alonso, King of Naples. When the ship seems to be breaking up in the Tempest, he swims ashore and believes his father drowned. Remember, he has been separated from everyone else. He washes up all alone. So he thinks that his father has drowned. Now, when he meets Miranda, he falls in love with her at first sight, but Prospero thinks they fall in love too easily. And that is why Prospero uses his magical powers to make Ferdinand a slave and force him to carry these logs. And Ferdinand puts up with it as long as he can see Miranda. So we've already read this part. We know this is what's happened, that Ferdinand and Miranda fall in love, and Prospero casts his spell on Ferdinand and sort of makes him do as he says. And Ferdinand is just, he's not happy about it, obviously, but he wants to be near Miranda. So like it says there, he puts up with it. So that is Ferdinand. So he swam ashore alone. He's loyal to his father. He falls in love with Miranda as soon as he sees her, immediately decides to marry her. And he's heard good things about Prospero and shows respect towards him when he finds out who he is. So this is a good man, essentially. He's not like his uncle. He's not like Sebastian. And he's also not like Antonio. This is a good man who is obviously very upset that when he thinks his father is dead, and then falls head over heels in love with Miranda. So pause the video again and complete Ferdinand's box, which is just here. And then the final one is Miranda. We've already seen quite a lot of Miranda. We know what she is like. This is Prospero's daughter and his only child. We're not told anything about her mother. And she was cast out to sea with her father when she was 3 years old. And that means really that all of her memories are from the island. She doesn't really remember anything from before she came to the island. She kind of says in Act 1, Scene 2 that she vaguely remembers people looking after her and tending to her, but she doesn't remember much apart from that. So everything she knows about the world is what her father has told her. So this is why it's interesting that Miranda falls in love with Ferdinand so quickly, because if you think about the people that Miranda has met in her life, since she was 3 years old, since she came to the island. The only people that she has met and known is Prospero and Caliban. Now, we know Caliban obviously treated Miranda very, very badly and still does, so she doesn't like him. Caliban is also a monster, and he's supposed to be hideously ugly. And Prospero is obviously Miranda's father. So Miranda sees Ferdinand, this beautiful young man, and immediately falls deeply in love with him. So that is Miranda. Prospero hopes she and Ferdinand will be attracted to each other, which obviously they are. This is all part of Prospero's plan. But when they immediately fall in love, he pretends to be angry and make Ferdinand a slave. So this love between Ferdinand and Miranda, Prospero kind of planned for this. He wanted this to happen. So when he's acting all angry at Ferdinand, this is just an act for him. He doesn't really mean it, because this is all part of his plan to get revenge on Alonso and Antonio. So in short then, she's grown up on the island. She can't remember ever seeing any other man beside her father and Caliban until the shipwreck. So once again then, fill in your box on Miranda, which is up here. Now, other boxes that you need to fill in is Prospero. Now, we know enough about Prospero, so you can hopefully fill that in for yourself. So pause the video again and fill in that box for Prospero. Okay, the next thing I would like you to do is write a comment about each character's relationship with the others. So I want you to now start making connections between the characters. So, for example, what is Prospero's relationship with Antonio? What is Prospero's relationship with Miranda? What is his relationship with Gonzalo? And so on. So see if you can just write a note about how each of these characters links with the rest of the characters. Now, some of them, there aren't going to be any links. So, for example, Miranda and Sebastian, probably not any links at the moment. But for most of these characters, you'll be able to write a comment about how each of the characters link with each other. So take your time on doing that. Make sure you get all of the names correct and you have all of those links right. Maybe spend about 10 or 15 minutes making up those connections. And now, if you have finished all of that, I have got an extension task for you, which is answering these 4 questions. So now you know a little bit more about the characters and the kind of things they're going to be getting up to in Act 2. I want you to make a judgment about who you think is going to be, or who you think is the kindest, the cruelest, who would be the best ruler, and who you think would be the worst ruler out of all of these characters. Once you've made a decision, I then want you to write me a short paragraph for each on why you think that. So if, for example, you think that Ferdinand is the kindest of the characters, I want you to explain to me why. What do we know about him already? What has he done? How has he acted? What has he said that makes him seem kind or cruel or the best ruler or the worst ruler? So give me some nice chunky reasons why you've made those choices. And that, guys, is all for today. So please take your time on these. Make sure you're really, really clear on which character is which, who is connected to who, who's related to who, and so on. Because next week, when we start to read Act 2, it's really important that you are really clear on who is who. Okay, good luck, and thank you very much.